Hi, and thanks for taking some time to watch today's Connect video. It is Tuesday, June 2nd. Our theme for the year is Kingdom Builders. We're trying to build the kingdom of God, not just build our church. And glad you've joined me today. My name is Steve Van Kley. I'm the lead pastor here at Canyon del Oro Bible Church in Oro Valley, Arizona, just north of Tucson. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at why women have been leaving the church over the past few years. Last week, we looked at data that showed how young men are increasing their engagement in religion. And today, we're going to see the opposite. We're going to see how women, especially young women, are disengaging from religion, from the church. And I've dug into a handful of recent studies and articles that summarize those studies. And so I want to share with you the data that I found there. So let's just get right to it. And why are women leaving the church? And the first thing to understand is that most of the women leaving are Gen Z, younger women. The latest surveys put the number of unaffiliated women in Gen Z at around 39%. And women overall, unaffiliated, are 43%. And you can see on this chart here, that's up 14% from 2013 if you track those numbers. On the left there, 2013, and then you see the increase, 14% over these years. So most of the women leaving, though, are young women who are leaving the church. The second reason is complementarian theology. Complementarian theology. Now, this gets into weeds a little bit theologically, but this is the theological understanding that believes pastors and elders in the church should be men, that they're male offices, if you will, in the church. Now, it's not such an issue with that view. It is more, that's part of it, but it's more of the misuses and the abuses of that position, of that theological position, theological belief. The misuses and abuses that have happened in many churches. And it's led to many women, especially Gen Z women, saying, no, I'm done. I'm not going to put up with this. It's not that all Gen Z women or older women would disagree with the complementarian view, but they're very unhappy and are not going to put up with it being misapplied or overused in a sense, a misapplication of it. I'll talk a little bit about this a little more in the what do we do here? How do we react or respond to this stuff? Okay, we'll do that at the end. Third reason that women are leaving the church: a majority of Gen Z women identify as feminists and are politically liberal. And in today's culture, everything's about politics. So politics fuels everything else. So that's kind of what's happening here. But with particular Gen Z women, many of them have very strong views regarding abortion and the LGBTQ community. And this has led to them disengaging churches who have different views on these issues, that are more conservative and orthodox in their understanding. In some studies, also, up to 1/3 of Gen Z women identify as LGBTQ. Now think about that. A lot of studies have shown up to 1/3, 33-ish%, right, of Gen Z women identify as LGBTQ. So their rejection of the church is not simply based on complementarianism or those kinds of, it's a rejection of the biblical sex ethic overall, all right? Number 4, some data shows that women are dropping out from church due to burnout. Now, this is a very different reason than the first 3. But the result is the same, right? For decades, women have carried the ministry burden in churches, while men have been spiritually passive. And there's a lot of data in some of these surveys that show that some women have simply grown weary. They're tired, and they're just dropping out. They're tired of carrying the ministry burden. David Kinnaman with Barna refers to this as compassion fatigue. And the pandemic has accelerated this burnout, which is why we're seeing it now. It's what he thinks. So that's another reason is I guess the baseline there would be the passivity of men over decades in spiritual things. We've seen a larger percentage of churches being made up of women and men being just very passive in it, and women have carried the water. And I think they're just like done with it in some ways. At least that's one of the things that came up in these surveys. Number 5, purity culture and negative church experiences. All right, so I personally am not very familiar with purity culture. I understand the purity movement and some of those things that go back 20 years or so, or maybe longer. And the reason I'm not familiar with purity culture is I've not been in a church that really pushed that movement. But numerous studies mentioned how this has been popular, mainly in a lot of, you could say maybe hardline Baptist and independent fundamentalist churches, where the church would place very high demand. This is part of the purity culture DNA, I guess, in churches, that they would put very high demands on girls and young women to dress modestly, be very chaste, because you don't want to cause a boy to stumble. So, and all this was put on their shoulders. But very few or no requirements were ever put on the boys or the young men. And some of the teaching in these churches put the burden of the man's behavior on the women. So that if a man misbehaved, then the woman's to blame. Well, you wore a skirt that's too short. Those kinds of thoughts. In addition to the purity culture, another reason some women have left the church is due to negative church experiences, which can be tied to this or totally separate issues, right? There can be a very long list of negative church experiences. But something happened which caused them to give up on the church. It's something they could not get over, did not want to maybe try to get over because of the pain and the foolishness, whatever it is, right? So in the studies, those are the 5 reasons why women, especially Gen Z women, are leaving the church, have been leaving. So how should the church respond? How do we react to this? What do you think about? Okay, I've got some suggestions here for us. Some of these we're doing, and some of these we need to do better, okay? Here at least our church, Canyon Del Oro Bible. How should we respond? Number 1, rebuilding community may also be a key to bringing the least religious generation back to church. So, sometimes churches can be all about the Sunday service. It's got to be more than that. Community has to be important. Small groups, creating opportunities for relationships to develop so that, how do we foster genuine community? Not just events, but where there's genuine community happening. All of these things are vitally important for us as a church, especially the young, if we want to connect with the younger generation who feels so isolated and so lonely, right? They have a lot of followers, but sometimes very, very few friends, people they can actually talk to face. So increasing community and the depth and genuine nature of it. Number 2, focus on hospitality ministry primarily in your home. So instead of always thinking, hey, I want to invite my friends to church, invite them over to dinner. Invite them over for a barbecue to watch the game, to have some dessert one night on the patio or something. Invite them to go out to eat at a restaurant that you both enjoy. We have to start to realize how important relationships are. And not just in the context of a church service, but just loving your family, friends, neighbors, coworkers. The circle of influence God has put you in the midst of. Now, we also need to improve the hospitality ministries at our church to make sure each person that walks into the doors or even comes onto the parking lot is welcomed warmly with genuine kindness and excitement to see them here. So we need to continue to improve that aspect of our church. But a lot of this is how we do this in our daily life. Number 3, encourage women to serve in leadership positions. So this gets to the complementarian issue a little bit. So at our church, we recognize the difference between the official offices of the church, pastor and elder, and the spiritual gifting that every Christian has received from the Holy Spirit. So there's a distinction that I've made here between the office of pastor and elder, which we're complementarian. We believe that's a male office. And that's more of an issue of responsibility, not ability. But also, there's a distinction there between office and gifting. All right? There's no gender-specific spiritual gifts, meaning women can have the gift of leadership, teaching, knowledge, wisdom, and so on. It's kind of the leadership bundle, if you will. And so we want to encourage and enable women to exercise their spiritual gift or their spiritual gifts. So we have women in key ministry leadership positions, using their gifts of leadership, wisdom, knowledge, and teaching. All right. So we need to be able to encourage women to serve and create pathways for them to serve in those ministries and recognize their gifting and not confuse gifting with the office of pastor or elder. All right. I could have a whole bunch of videos on that. I'm not going to do that right now. Let's go on to number 4. The fourth and final thing that I think we can do here is listen to the thoughts, ideas, and concerns of women. In the studies, a lot of them said women felt they had no voice, that they were never listened to, and they're just viewed as second class in some churches that have a real conservative or traditional view of the family and marriage and stuff like this, okay? We need to listen to the thoughts, the ideas, the concerns of women. We need to know and believe. In other words, don't just do this to check the box, but know and believe that God has gifted both men and women with intellect, with insight, wisdom, the ability to think deeply on issues. We need to give women the opportunity to speak into the direction of the church. Now, I don't publicize this, but let me share how this has played out in the ministry here at CDO. All right. I've been doing this for a number of years. I call it a women's advisory team, and I meet with them once a quarter, and I listen to them. I ask them questions, and they're free to ask me questions. I create an agenda. The agenda usually is a summary of what we've been covering in a lot of the elder meetings and some of the bigger picture issues here at the church that we're thinking about and moving toward and these kinds of things. And I just bounce these things. I said, this is what we're doing. Talk. What do you think? Give me ideas. Give me your thoughts. What's your first reaction? And they give me ideas and thoughts about the direction of the church. And I do this intentionally because we're a complementarian church, right? We're a complementarian in our theological view, which impacts the structure of our church, which means that I need to be very intentional about listening to women and giving women an opportunity to speak into the leadership process, if you will, and hear the wisdom they have and the thoughts and the ideas they have as to the direction and future of the church. So it's not that you throw out your whole theological belief system. It's you understand there are some gaps sometimes, especially in a complementarian-based church. And the gap is sometimes women don't have a way to speak into the process. And so you have to be intentional to create those opportunities and recognize the women that do have these leadership gifts and listen to them and invite them in and let them speak into the process. So, big topic. Hard to cover it exhaustively, certainly in 13 or 14 minutes, but here's the sources I used for this video. Quite a few sources. There's 2 pages of sources here to show you today. Obviously, would love for you to go dig deeper in these things if you wanted to, but lots of opportunity for you to check into these different surveys that have been done and the articles that summarize them. In my video next week, I'm going to discuss having a happy marriage. Having a happy marriage. I'm hitting this video because tomorrow is Kim and I, it's our anniversary, 37 years. And so I thought, we'll talk about marriage next week in our video. Thanks for taking a few minutes to connect with me here today. I hope you can join us this Sunday as we continue our series called Retro Gospel. It's a study of the book of Galatians in the New Testament. We're walking through verse by verse. Service times are 9:15 or 11 o'clock. The live stream is available. If you can't be here in person, live stream is available. To watch the live stream, you can go to our website. There's a link on our website on Sunday mornings. Go to cdobible.org. Or just go straight to our YouTube channel, search Canyon del Oro Bible Church, click on our logo, and subscribe and join us then via the live stream. Hey, thanks again for watching. First week of summer, meteorological summer as they say, so up around 100 degrees this week. Hope you have a great week. Hope you stay cool. More importantly, though, I hope you're a blessing to everyone you meet. Bye-bye.